Hey there, friends and running fans. This is Andy Burfoot, welcoming you to the latest episode of the podcast, Running, State of the Sport.
And this is George Hirsch, your co-host at Running, State of the Sport. In every episode, we talk to the smartest, most informed, most influential, and sometimes fastest runners on the planet.
This week, we have a fascinating conversation with Matt Taylor, the founder and CEO of Tracksmith, the running and apparel footwear company. This conversation is a little bit more about business than running and elite competition, but Matt has had a very interesting career. In his years at Puma, for example, he actually worked closely with Usain Bolt, so he's got some pretty wild information to tell us about Usain.
Matt also talks about his personal racing in the last year at age 46, after getting serious about racing for the first time in 15 years. In the mile, he aimed to run 4 minutes plus his age, and in the marathon, he aimed for 2 hours plus his age. Pretty darn ambitious goals, and he achieved both. But before speaking with Matt, Amby and I want to review the biggest running news that happened lately. Amby, what got your attention?
George, I'm always interested, as I think many are, in the power and money behind the scenes. So I was intrigued by a report about a brewing power struggle between Thomas Bach, who's head of the International Olympic Committee, and Seb Coe, who's head of World Athletics and also a leading candidate to become the next president of the International Olympic Committee. It turns out that Bach is unhappy that World Athletics will be awarding prize money at the Olympics this year, and he's starting to look around to see if there's ways he can block Coe from grabbing the position next year when Bach's presidency ends. Coe doesn't appear to be looking for a fight. He's simply positioning himself as a positive change agent in the sport, which of course everyone thinks we need. And on a completely different level, almost absurd, George, the most amazing track news I heard this week is that an 11-year-old, that's 11, named Gunnar Hammett, Gunnar's a pretty good name, he ran 800 meters in 2:00.69. Basically 2 minutes flat at the New Balance Outdoor Nationals. I think that was my 400-meter time when I was 11. Anyway, it's rather mind-blowing. And George, I'm glad you had your eyes on the Olympic trials being held in those powerhouse East African countries.
Yeah, very much, Amby. You can't take your eyes off the Kenyans, for example, if you're a track fan. And we all know from the middle distances on up, you just expect big things, and big things certainly during an Olympic year. But even at the 100 meters, Ferdinand Omanyala ran 9.79 in the 100 at altitude. I mean, that means he's going to be, lining up most likely in Paris against the likes of Noah Lyles and Christian Coleman and some the world's best sprinters. Also in the 800 meters, there was an extraordinary performance by a 19-year-old, get this, 19-year-old Kenyan named Emmanuel Wanyanyi, and he ran 1:41.7. So let me tell you what 1:41.7 is. It's, Amby, it's breathtaking, and he did it at altitude, but this is the third fastest time ever run. Of course, the two fastest were the two prior world record holders, David Rudisha, Wilson Kepketer, and he just is a touch faster than the aforementioned Seb Coe, who held that world record for such a long time. So the Kenyans they're coming to Paris loaded on the men's side, and then on the women's side, they've got just as good a gold medal hope as I think exists in track and field in Faith Kipyegon. At the trials in Kenya, she won the 1500, her specialty, and she won the 5,000. So she's and in very, very fast times, and she's primed to go, and we expected nothing less. Second place, Beatrice Chebet in the 5,000, also ran a fabulous time. So great performances, definitely expected from Kenya. Ethiopia decided to hold their trials in Spain, in Nerja, Spain. Reason being, they were going to put them at sea level so they could mirror the conditions much more closely that they're going to experience in Paris next month. Wow, Amby, there was a 10,000 meter race that was just simply the deepest 10,000 meter race ever run. And this was just the Ethiopian trials. 7 men ran under 27 minutes. And you know, and I know, when 27 minutes was just something we couldn't even, imagine. And now you've got one race and 7 Ethiopians are there. We're going to see a lot of East African dominance for sure in Paris. That's about it on my end.
Well, George, I have to say the Ethiopians were spectacular, but the time that Faith Kipyegon ran in the 1,500 meter at Nairobi, pretty darn good altitude, 353 plus. That made my head spin around a couple of times. I am not doing one of those conversions to what a sea level time would be, but that's an incredible performance at any level, and she is really going to be almost impossible to beat in Paris if there is such a thing. And that's the biggest recent running news from Running, State of the Sports. Now let's turn to Matt Taylor, this week's guest on the Running State of the Sport podcast. Matt is the founder and CEO of Tracksmith, the Boston-based running apparel and shoe company. Tracksmith was started in 2014, and its footprint has been growing ever since, I think perhaps because it's had so many innovative products and programs under one roof. Matt, it's nice to have you here on our podcast.
It's really nice to really be here with you guys. Thank you, Amby. And, just to, not to butter you up before the conversation to come here, but I do just want to take a moment to say that I'm really honored to be amongst running royalty. I think you are both part of, obviously an older generation, but it's one whose stories and accomplishments I really admire. And I think it's important that we keep these stories alive and educate and inspire the next generation. And, I know your listeners, maybe a lot of them know your stories, but, I'm fascinated by both of you, George. You obviously being one of the first publishers in the running print space with The Runner, which, later was acquired by Rodale and became Runner's World, which was the running magazine that, my generation grew up with, and obviously helping to start the 5-borough New York City Marathon. And, what I find most wild, and maybe it's a topic we'll dive into a little bit later, is that you actually hosted a segment on SportsCenter about running, which, maybe shows how far we've fallen since the 80s, that, SportsCenter is, not thinking about running at all. And Amby, obviously we've known each other for a long time. I remember coming to Emmaus, looking at a job at Runner's World shortly after graduating from college, and you were just so kind and encouraging. And obviously we've kept in touch over the years, but you are a Boston Marathon champion. There's only been 115 or 20 of those. There's been some repeat winners. I don't know what the number is, but you are one of those. And the other thing that's pretty wild is your roommate, obviously Bill Rogers, was also a Boston Marathon champion. And I can't imagine that there's other college roommates that went on to become major marathon champions. So anyway, I really admire both of you and your accomplishments. And I think most importantly, the contributions you've made to our sport over the years. So I'll speak for my whole generation and say thank you. But anyway, we can get on with the conversation. I just wanted to take the moment and thanks for indulging me there.
George, Matt, I obviously got the check we put in the mail to him beforehand. We should not treat him as nicely as he's been treating us because we like to be a little bit journalistic. But George, you get the first question.
Yeah, so Matt, we usually start by asking a couple of basic bio questions, but in your case, we're going to kind of turn it around. I'm going to throw you a little bit of your bio and you're going to comment on it. You're currently 47 years old. And a year or so ago, you said that your competitive drive had returned for the first time in some 15 or 20 years, and you set yourself two big running goals in the mile and in the marathon, two classic distances. But first, where had your competitive drive been hiding? Where had it gone? And tell us about those goals as you sort of return to a competitive style or atmosphere in your life.
Yeah, I mean, people who know me well know that I am one of those hyper competitive people. I think I'm just wired that way. I hate to lose at absolutely anything. It could be the silliest little activity, and I just don't like losing. And so really for me, it was not so much that my competitive drive was hiding. It was there in plain sight. I think it was just manifesting itself in different ways. I adult league basketball, or coaching my kids, or obviously starting Tracksmith. And I just post my most competitive days in running, I just found other ways to channel that competitiveness into other things. So I was still running throughout this time for sure, and still doing some workouts, but it was not, there was no larger goal. I wasn't racing. And so yeah, I think, when you hit your 40s, you obviously enter a new class as a master's athlete. It sort of reinvigorates a little bit of that because you have sort of some new challenges. You aren't comparing yourself to your 20-year-old self anymore. You have competition in these masters races. You're not, competing against 20-year-olds. And so that sort of just sparked a little bit of this competitive drive to kind of, put in the work and get after it again.
So you set some specific goals and you used a little mathematics to get to them, Matt. Let's do your mile goal first. What was the math, and then how did you go after and achieve it?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, my goal was to run 4 minutes plus my age in the mile, which, just felt like a challenging but achievable goal for me. Obviously, that math doesn't work for everybody, but it sort of felt like a good target for me. What really, though, got me excited, I think, was to train like a miler again and to just sort of embrace that process. I was a middle distance runner in college, so that's sort of more my background. And part of the reason I wanted to go back to that training was when I turned 40, I did start to get injured more frequently. I've been a relatively lucky runner up until my 40s. Yeah, George is pointing to himself as well. We've probably all experienced it. The body does hit a point where, it starts to go south, and that probably happens around 40. So I just, up until that point, I was just running. So I just went back to my college days where I definitely prioritized speed and strength and mobility alongside distance. And, I started doing plyometrics again and hill sprints, and I started lifting weights and just paying more attention to what I was eating. And so, and I found the right balance for me around, one hard workout a week and maybe a long run versus the 2 hard workouts in a long run. And so I just, that's just what I followed. It didn't all click right away. It did take a little while, but after several months of just being really, really consistent with that approach, I could tell I was getting fit again. And so, last summer, basically, my son and I, we were living in London, my family. And so my son and I went and ran a mile, the Dave Clark mile at Wimbledon. And I was able to run 4:44, which was great. So when we moved back from London, I just kind of built off of that. I really doubled down on trying to be as consistent as I could, but never really going to the well or pushing too far, just being able to stay healthy and consistent. And, so this last winter I was, Boston, we have, no shortage of indoor tracks here. So I was able to run at the Terrier Classic at BU and ran 4:41, and then was invited to the Masters Mile at the New Balance Grand Prix, which is a race I watched for many years as a spectator. Never thinking I would be in that class. But here I am, and was able to run 4:37 at that race, which really surprised me.
So that's the mile part of your goal. Now the marathon, in some way I kind of got the feeling maybe was even harder. The marathon, requires some heavy duty, serious training. Tell us about that. What was your goal, and how did you go after it?
Yeah, again, my goal was 2 hours plus my age. Again, the math just sort of worked for me. So, I wanted to try to run 2:47 or faster. It felt, challenging, but achievable. To be honest, I didn't follow a specific plan. There's no shortage of marathon training plans out there. I just kind of went with intuition. And, I just felt like if I did most of my harder workouts at either sort of just slower than marathon pace or just faster, that I would sort of work myself into a good spot. So I did a lot of, classic 20-minute tempo runs at like half marathon pace. And I did a lot of mile repeats with 1 minute rest at just slower than marathon pace. And I built my long run up to maybe the one thing I just experimented with. The long run, I went up to 27 miles. I know a lot of people don't get up to the full distance, but I just felt like, having not run a marathon in 15-ish years, I just think my body needed to go through that experience once before I got to the line. So I don't know if that worked or not, but certainly felt like I was prepared going into race day.
And tell us how race day was. What was good? What was harder than you might have liked?
Yeah, I mean, it was a tough day in Boston this year, as you probably know. It was hot, and it was, classic Boston. It was sort of the first hot day we had. And so, all of the training had been in colder, wet weather, and, you get to race day and it's sunny and much warmer than you've experienced. But, it's Boston's amazing. The crowds were really great. I was fortunate. My family, my parents and in-laws were there to support me, and, got to many points on the course. My wife was driving everyone around and getting out at multiple spots. After the race, the Track House, our store on Newbury Street, is such a special place on Monday after the race. And so it was really fun to sort of experience that from the runner side. For 8 or 9 years now, I've sort of acted as the host, and it was nice to come through the doors having, just spent, almost 3 hours out there with everyone else. And so, the bad, I mean, it is Boston. The doubts definitely crept in. The desire to quit was strong. And for a lot of runners, it seemed like those doubts crept in, earlier than you would like. I know a lot of runners were talking about, 8 miles in, they were already starting to feel it. Certainly through Wellesley, I was starting to feel it there. But so it's a tough day, but I was able to manage a 2:43. So yeah, was able to achieve my time goal again.
Impressive. You wrote a short essay about the marathon that you ran, and it was about the race, as you've just been talking, and also about your footwear that day, the Elliott Racer. Tell us about the shoe and how you came to name it the Elliott Racer.
Yeah. So we are launching a super shoe, a carbon plated, super shoe. And, I've been testing, prototypes for a long time now, and, had to pair the latest version of it, for race day. And Elliott is, we also have an everyday training shoe called the Elliott Runner, and this will be the Elliott Racer. Elliott, the inspiration there comes from a few places. The Elliott Bridge along the Charles is one of our go-to runs from the office. Many runs go across that bridge. And then of course the famous Elliott Lounge has always been a great source of inspiration for Tracksmith. So, it's just a name that sticks a lot around here. So we decided to call our first shoe that.
So I had a question for you about your company, Tracksmith, which has so much of a Boston or a New England aspect or attitude or something to it. That seems strange to me because obviously Nike doesn't call itself Nike Oregon and New Balance doesn't call itself New Balance Boston. Why would you start a company with a regional focus as it seems you did?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's a single way to build a brand. I think that there's a toolbox that you have at your disposal. And personally, I wanted Tracksmith to have a sense of place or provenance. And, where better to do that as a running brand than in Boston? The history, the races, the clubs, the college infrastructure here. We have all four seasons. We have cross country, indoor, outdoor, summer roads, so I love everything that New England has to offer from a running perspective. And so we wanted to build that sense of place into the ethos and DNA of the brand.
So let's talk a little about your corporate strategy at Tracksmith. You started as an apparel company. Now you're selling shoes and backpacks and sunglasses and so where does it go from here, and at what point is there overreach in what you're doing? You've had, it seems to me, a lot of early success. What is this company going to look like in the next 5 years or so?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think there's no single way to build a brand. I think maybe what you're suggesting with your question is sort of whether there's been a lack of focus. But for me, I think it's not so much about what products we sell, but do those products come from a hyper-focused vision? And they do. I didn't start Tracksmith to sell clothes. I started Tracksmith to serve the needs of the committed runner. And I felt strongly then, and I still do today, that running deserves better. And, we all know running is a lifestyle. For many of us, it's something we orient our lives around. And so we make products to serve the committed runner's lifestyle, whether that's for, training or racing or rest days. And it allows our team the freedom to explore everything from apparel and footwear and, backpacks and sunglasses and, anything else that we may feel fits into the sort of wants and needs of the committed runner.
Matt, I said we were going to ask you some tough questions. I suppose this one isn't that difficult, but George and I come from a magazine background, of course, as you mentioned, and we were lucky to get out of that field when we did, with half of our skin still on us 15 years ago. We all know that print magazines are dead and or dying, and yet it looks like Tracksmith is doing a print magazine called Meter Magazine. Why that?
Yeah, great question. I mean, we are, I think, at heart a storytelling brand. I believe there's sort of nothing that moves people more than a powerful story. And we all know there are multiple formats to bring stories to life. And for sure, we've moved to digital forms of that being the predominant form of storytelling these days. I have a soft spot for print. And, we to be honest, the magazine sort of ebbs and flows. In terms of, where it fits into the Tracksmith, ecosystem. But we have throughout the 10 years, had various forms of the magazine and other print pieces that we've pushed out there. And so, yes, you're right. There are some challenges inherent with the print format, but there are still people who like to sort of have a physical object in their hands, and it's a great medium to tell stories, especially visual and written ones.
As an old magazine publisher, I've been really struck by the quality of the graphics, the design, the photography of everything you're doing, not just Meter the magazine, but all your promotional work, the videos I've seen. It strikes me, this has obviously been very deliberate, a lot of work's gone into it. I think it will be a big part of the success you've had in creating this this brand. It's just been something of a very, very high quality. Tell us about it. Your thinking, you were able to inform all of that, what that means to the company.
Yeah, I mean, I've been very fortunate to employ great creative talent at Tracksmith. And, I think you're, being a publisher yourself, George, you probably know that, it's one thing to sort of have a vision for, a magazine or a story or a brand. And it's another thing to have the people and the talent to actually bring that vision to life. And I feel like I've been fortunate there to find people that are better at me to do that. But one of the things that I think I'm most proud of is just the way that we've sort of changed how running gets presented, and specifically through that visual form, whether that's photography or film, and the way that we do things, the way that we shoot the athletes, whether photography or film, it is very distinct in this space. And I think it's what allows us to create these sort of emotionally quite powerful visuals. They feel very real because they are, and they feel very authentic because they are. And I think that comes through. And people may not recognize that. They may not know why they're drawn to this particular image or this particular film, but that is why, because they're relating to it on an emotional level, and they can recognize that they've been through that same thing. And they may not go, oh, wow, this feels real, but they just inherently kind of know, like, oh, yeah, I've been there too. And so I think that's been something that's been a really, clear point of distinction for Tracksmith.
Matt, we've got to drop back in time a little bit here, because you didn't just drop from the womb and form Tracksmith the next day. You did other things in the running space before that. And I could be remembering this completely wrong, but I seem to recall that you did something called crib videos for letsrun.com. Is that right?
That's pretty close. I actually did those videos as part of my own website, which was Chasing Tradition.
Okay.
But Weldon was kind enough to post them on letsrun.com. So.
Okay. I didn't know what a crib video was, so you educated me, and I found out that it's simply you take your iPhone camera or whatever into Alan Webb's bedroom, and then you let us see what posters he's got on the wall and stuff like that. But you've definitely had a relationship of some kind through the years with Let's Run, because Weldon, I believe, was a college track teammate of yours. Was there ever a time when you thought of getting more on board at Let's Run, which is out there, 15 years longer than Tracksmith?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Weldon and I were teammates in college. I was a freshman when he was a senior, and he stayed very close to his running career when he made the Olympic trials in track and the marathon, and when the trials were in Pittsburgh, which is where I'm from. So we had a nice little gathering for him during that attempt. But it's a good question. I've been close with and talked to Weldon and Robert over the years, and have provided my guidance or advice or whatever along the way. But I think I've just always wanted to start my own company, and I've known that since a young age. I kind of grew up in a family that had a pretty strong entrepreneurial spirit, and so I never really thought about that as an opportunity. But yeah, that's in hindsight, maybe could have learned some things along the way, but I had other ambitions.
And along the way, you ended up with a big job at Puma, which back then was known largely as Usain Bolt's shoe company. And you spent time working with Bolt and all the promotional activities around him. Tell us what that was like, and what did you learn with Puma and Usain himself?
Yeah, I was the luckiest person in the world during that stretch. I mean, I started at Puma in 2007, within a few weeks, found myself in Jamaica. At the time, Usain was still kind of considered an underachieving Jamaican sprinter. He was not well known yet, had all the potential in the world, but had not sort of reached it yet. Fast forward to the New York Grand Prix, at Icon Stadium, and he breaks the world record in the 100 running 9:72. I was at that race and sort of filming Usain and doing some of the backstory, and no one expected the world record. And then, from there through Beijing, through Berlin, through, Diamond League, I just had a front row seat. I got to travel. I just feel so lucky and fortunate. I kind of just got to experience that firsthand. Was really to see a track athlete for the first time in a long time reach that sort of global celebrity status, where whether we were in Paris or Oslo or, Berlin, if he walked down the street, people would actually stop him and ask for autographs. And there's not many runners that can say that happens to them, especially in global cities, So yeah, that was just an incredible time to sort of see that and have a front row seat for that. And, maybe played a small part in helping to sort of build his, his stature and help Puma in a way. I learned a lot during that period, and certainly Puma for me was probably like my MBA, my real world MBA. I sort of got exposure to a lot of the areas of the business, from marketing to product and promotion. And so it was a really good experience for me, and definitely a period of time that I look back on very fondly.
Matt, you know what the people really want to know is, how was the late night, early morning party scene with Usain?
I've signed many. No, I'm just kidding. No, it was great. It was fun. I mean, again, he was a young guy in his prime, and he certainly had a lot of fun, during the day and into the evening. And he was treated, really well wherever he went. And so, it was really fun to be along for that. But yeah, we had some really fun times.
So after Puma, when and how did you decide you were going to launch your own business, and what was going to be your unique sort of market positioning?
Yeah. I mean, as I mentioned, I kind of always knew I wanted to start my own company. And as my career progressed, I just got more and more focused on running being, the specific category. It's where my passion was. It's where my expertise was. I was a, consumer, a participant. I worked in the industry, right? So I felt like I had everything that I needed. And so I started to really look at everything, from tech to apparel and footwear to events to media, and just sort of tried to figure out where was the opportunity to come in and create something quite distinct from the get-go. And so we launched with men's apparel. It seemed like an easy area to create something really different from the start, different than everything else that was on the market. But as I mentioned before, the vision was obviously much greater than just apparel. And really the positioning was just, being able to sort of combine style and performance together, and then just wrap that in sort of a culturally relevant brand. And I think, a lot of the bigger brands, they were either focused on, trying to get some world records or Olympic champions, or they were targeting sort of the, maybe new to running health and wellness consumer. And in the middle was millions and millions of runners like myself who were never going to be professional, but also were, not new to it. And so I thought if I could sort of combine those things together, it would give us a sort of just a point of distinction within the market at that time.
Matt, we'd love to get a personal anecdote. So I'm going to ask, what do you think was maybe the smartest thing you ever did at Tracksmith? And that's going to be followed by, what was the not smartest thing you ever did?
I mean, the smartest thing was surrounding myself with great people. Again, it's challenging to do all of the things and to do them all well. And I've been fortunate there. Maybe to say one more, that first Boston Marathon pop-up that we did in 2015 on Newbury Street was, just something. Now we look back and, if either of you have been to Boston recently, Newbury Street is filled with brands. They all do pop-ups on the street. We did our first one. Everyone was still at the expo, but we were sort of able to create this really unique experience. It felt like our own. We were super new and, still very inexperienced, but that was definitely an early, just sort of turning point for the brand and kind of, to a small audience, put us on the map. And we've been able to build and grow from that to the point that, we show up at all 6 major marathons and they become these enormous, revenue drivers for the brand, but also great ways to build relationships with our customers. So that's, that would maybe be my, smart in the smartest thing category. In the not so smart category. Oh man, I don't know if there's anything that I would do over, and that may sound like a cop out, but there have been plenty of mistakes and missteps along the way, but it also just kind of feels like that's part of the process, and it's just part of the learning and the growing. And as much as those mistakes can be painful, I almost view it like training, right? Where you need the stress, you need to stress the system to grow. And so, as much as I can lose sleep and it can affect me mentally and physically when something challenging is happening, I've gotten to a point, I think, in this journey where I do view that as a necessary step in the process. And I try to just kind of take it in stride that way. And so there's definitely been way too many missteps to pick one, but they all ladder up to sort of a great learning experience.
So, Matt, at the last couple of Olympic marathon trials, you had quite a few runners wearing your apparel. How do you go about getting them to do that?
Yeah, it started really small and kind of just snowballed into what it's become. The beginning of that was we had a few employees or friends of the brand who either had the Olympic trials standard or were chasing it back leading up to the 2020 trials in Atlanta, marathon trials. And, we wanted to support them. We didn't have the budgets of the other brands. So we just created this, sort of program that would give some folks some gear. We had some partnerships with other brands that they could get some, discounts or some other things that would help them in their journey. We built a little bit of a community and team so that they felt like they had teammates again, because when you leave college, a lot of athletes lose the camaraderie that they had as a college athlete, and they lose that team. And so so it started small, and then as these sort of races happened in the build up to the trials, after each race, when a dozen athletes would get the Olympic standard, they would sort of write in and ask to join the program. And so it started with, half dozen to a few dozen. And, in the end in Atlanta, I think we had 125 or so athletes, roughly 20% of the field was in that program. And it was amazing. We were so honored and proud. And we then sort of took that learning and experience and shifted our focus to the track and field trials, opened it up to all disciplines. And so in Eugene and now, 2021, obviously we had to postpone the trials in 2020. So in 2021 in Eugene, similarly, we had a disproportionate percentage of the field, given our size as a brand. In Tracksmith, I think we were the only brand that had an athlete in every discipline as well, which was great. We had 5 athletes make the Olympics out of that program, everything from the steeplechase to the javelin throw. Last year at the U.S. Championships, we had the 100-meter champion in Cravant Charleston in the program. And so it's just been a great experience. We view it as like the developmental league. We're like the G League for the NBA. It's like we're helping athletes who aren't able to get a contract with the bigger brands. And when they do reach that success, we view it as a huge success. It's like a big moment internally when someone actually goes and signs a contract with with another running brand. We view that as a success of the program. And we've had a few athletes go on to do that, and we still cheer for them as loudly as we do anyone else in the program. So,
Matt, if I was sitting in your chair, I would maybe list that as my number one smartest thing that I did at Tracksmith, because we all love our regional 2:15 marathon runners, and we know they're not going to make the Olympic team, but damn, we see them out there training hard every week and every month and running the local races, and get to the Olympic marathon trials alone is a huge thing for them. And to have a modest company giving them a modest amount of support, but recognizing them is a big, big thing. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
So here's the big future question. What is the future of Tracksmith? Where are you headed? And are there more unexpected products or developments or new things around the corner?
Yeah, I mean, we are obviously in the last year or so, we've sort of, taken two big steps. One is around our retail strategy. We always had our store in Boston, but last year we opened in Brooklyn and we also opened in London. So we view, retail as sort of a big opportunity for us. We don't have, these super ambitious plans, but certainly could see a track house in a lot of the sort of cultural capitals in running around the world. And so that's something that we're working on. We've also just sort of, no pun intended, dipped our toe in the footwear category here and also have a lot of confidence and ambition around what that can be in the future. And so there's a lot of focus on that. And then, and to your point, I mean, we love to build unexpected products. I think that we like to push the boundaries of what makes something a running product. We have a polo tee, we have a turtleneck this winter, we've got a product that's never been done in running before. And, most people will think it's stupid or crazy, but I personally just wouldn't find it as interesting if we didn't sort of allow ourselves to experiment and push the boundaries. And I think it's a great, again, for creative individuals within the brand, it gives them a bit of an outlet to experiment and push the boundaries. And, we're small enough to let those projects see the light of day, whereas it may be a bigger company, they would get killed along the way. So yeah, that's just part of our ethos is to push the boundaries a bit on what's considered, quote unquote, a running product.
So, Matt, this podcast, as you know, is running, state of the sport. So how do you assess the state of running, what's going well these days, and what could be improved?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, I hate to be the downer, but it's, the state of the sport is not great. There's no segment on Sports Center, George. There's no yeah, I know. Running's not covered in any of the sort of mainstream sports publications or even sort of mainstream, New York Times, Boston Globe, those types of outlets rarely cover the sport. I think ultimately the financial incentives are just not aligned with building the sport. And when I say the sport, I mean like the sport as it has a fan base and it's a for-profit and, it's thriving and growing. People can view the sport as more around performance and how fast people run. When I say sport in this context, I mean, like, is it a thriving sport that is creating a financial ecosystem? And, I think running maybe, I mean, you guys may have some other thoughts, but I think running is the only sport where all of the decisions seem to revolve around the athlete and agent needs and requests rather than what's best for the fans. And you will never grow a sport when, that's the way that it's run. And that's primarily, again, because the financial incentives are such that it creates just a bizarre dynamic. I don't know. That said, what's going well, it does seem like every decade or so, and you guys have lived through probably a few of these moments, it does seem like some people come in and try to agitate the system, whether it's, new leagues, new events, new media properties, and new athlete personalities also come and go. And so, maybe something from this sort of moment of agitation that does seem to be happening, maybe something will stick. So I'll be following along closely, but I think there's some challenges.
Matt, so our last question, or really its response for you, gives you a chance to perhaps address some of the things you just raised. We give all our guests 3 wishes from a fairy godmother. These are things that you'd like to see. You can say profit increase, or you can say fan base, or who will run well in Paris and beyond. You get 3 wishes. What would you like them to be?
And I assume one of the wishes can't be to wish for more wishes, right?
You are right.
That's the golden rule. Yeah. Okay. I mean, let's take running or the sport of running. I mean, one would be that someone does break the system. I think that there's, no way the sport becomes a sort of national or global, quote unquote success by working within the current system and infrastructure. I think someone has to come in, start from scratch with no allegiances and just sort of a singular vision to make running a professional for-profit sport with a thriving fan base. So I hope that someone can come in and do that. And like I mentioned, there also are been some announcements recently around new leagues and new formats and new events. And so, we'll see. Number two, I have been sort of fascinated by the story of Earl Johnson. And I'm not sure if you two are familiar with Earl Johnson. He was the bronze medalist at the 1924 Paris Olympics in cross country. He was a Black American born and raised in Pittsburgh, which is where I'm from. And he worked in the steel mills in Pittsburgh, as my dad did. And he actually used to run for Thompson Steel, and his singlet had Thompson Steel across the chest. So this is, just thinking, and we've probably missed the moment because the Olympics are upon us here, but 100 years later, we have the Olympics back in Paris. To bring cross country back into the Olympics, I think would be an amazing, just team, opportunity. There's plenty of ways you could do that would be very interesting, whether it's sort of more of a relay style where you bring back the idea of a short and a long, so you could have sort of a variety of athletes from middle distance to long distance, I think it would be amazing. And so there's just sort of in my head swirling this Earl Johnson story. And I think that, I don't remember if that was the last year the Olympics had cross country, but he's the only American ever to medal in cross country at the Olympics. So that would be, I guess, number two. And then three, I'll bring it back to myself, I guess, and be a little selfish. I would love to win the Wellfleet road race one more time in my life. It's a very small road race on the Cape. This summer is actually the 50th running, which is pretty amazing. It started 1 year after Falmouth. So Falmouth's 50th was last year, which I was fortunate enough to run. So I won the Wellfleet road race, a few times when I was younger and faster. And I, usually finish somewhere in the top 5. And I'm just hoping 1 year some of the young guns don't show up and I can get one more victory in the Wellfleet road race before my time has passed. So those would be my 3 wishes.
Well, Matt, as someone who's been through that many years of running the same race and having a few early wins, I can tell you that an age group victory in your age group counts at Wellfleet this summer.
Fair enough.
Absolutely.
Fair enough.
So that is it for our podcast conversation with Matt Taylor. Matt, thank you so much for joining us and really sharing a lot of insightful information and a special perspective with us. It's been a real pleasure.
A real pleasure for me, Matt. And you should know I always have a rooting interest in the entrepreneur, for sure.
I really appreciate that. I really enjoyed the opportunity and just to reiterate what I said at the beginning, just honored that you would have me on and really enjoyed the conversation. So thank you.
Amby, that was a wide-ranging conversation with Matt Taylor about business and running. He's accomplished quite a lot for a still young guy and is obviously very passionate about running and runners. What struck you about his comments today?
I liked when he started telling us a little bit more about his personal training for his 2 big goals this year, the mile and the marathon. And when he said he did one or several 27 milers before the Boston Marathon, I was like, what? Who really does that stuff anymore? I didn't think anyone did. So he was really all in once he decided he was going to run Boston. And I also loved his fairy godmother wish, a little personal one, which I think is great. Apparently, he won the Wellfleet road race on Cape Cod a few times when he was younger and faster, probably 20 years ago. and he would love to win it just one more time this summer. It's the 50th running of that Wellfleet race, and of course, he's got it on his chalkboard and his personal calendar. He's going for it. I think that kind of reflects the way all of us feel. So we wish we would just get one more at bat with the bases loaded in the bottom of the ninth to see what we can do. I hope Matt has a good one this summer. So George, what did you find particularly interesting about Matt's long conversation with us?
Yeah, Amby, what I liked is when we asked him about the branding, and by that we meant the visual impact of the design, the photography, the layouts of all that they're doing, whether it's on social media or their print promotion and so on, which is so high quality. And just a quote from him, he said, "Yeah, I've been really fortunate to enjoy great creative talent at Tracksmith. And, I think you guys coming out of publishing sort of know you have a vision, and then you kind of create from there a brand. And it's really important to have the talent behind you." But I think Matt had a very strong sense of what he was creating, and the authenticity, even the nostalgia from the sport. And here he said, I'm going to just quote from it, but one of the things I think I'm most proud of is the way we've sort of changed how running gets presented, and specifically through that visual form, whether that's photography or film, and the way that we do things, the way that we shoot the athletes, whether photography or film. It's very distinct in this space. And I think it's what allows us to create these sort of emotionally quite powerful visuals. Amby, I think he's right. I think that has done an awful lot. That incredibly strong brand impact that Matt's created. And it's just appealed to runners so much.
Well, I think Matt, of course, is very smart to credit his co-workers, the talent in his art department, his video department, and whatnot. But I agree with you. Talent is kind of everywhere if you're lucky enough to look for it. But vision and focus of a leader, I think, are much rarer and much more important. And that seems to be what Matt has brought to Tracksmith. I think that's it for this week's episode of Running State of the Sport. We hope you enjoyed joining us as much as we enjoyed sharing the time with you. We'll be back again soon with another episode. Until then, please tell your friends about Running State of the Sport. We'd also appreciate a review at your favorite podcast host, like Apple Podcasts or Spotify Podcasts. In signing off, here's our hope for the state of your own personal running. Chin up, clear eyes, full heart, keep moving. Onward.